Hello and welcome to the Elsie Smith Show. My lovely guest today, all the way from New Mexico, is Cynthia Lucas. Cynthia is a film producer, a writer, and a lecturer of transformative films that educate and inspire. She and director co-producer Cal Kearns created the non-profit educational media organization, Heaven on Earth Creations, in 2004. They've co-produced 6 acclaimed documentaries about humanity's oneness and non-violence. The 7th and the 8th are Gandhis Gift and Gandhis Awakening, which will be broadcast by American public television on PBS. And these are the first major films about Gandhi made in the US. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Cynthia, you spent 6 years to make these 2 films on Gandhi. How did that come about?
Well, co-producer, director Cal Kearns and I believe that Gandhi's message is even more relevant today than it was when he was walking the earth. He was assassinated in 1948, and that seems like a long time ago in some respects. But his life message, that's what he said, my life is my message. His life message of nonviolence is even more timely, we believe, than ever before. So we've spent these last 6 years of our lives making these 2 films in order to give them to the world. In our intention is to inspire and to activate people through watching him in action in these 2 films and hearing about his philosophy and his practices of nonviolence, absolute equality, interfaith harmony, and sustainability.
Interfaith harmony, you mentioned. It was fascinating for me to watch some of the promotional material about people identifying themselves as Hindu Muslims. And it was quite okay for him to have Christians sharing the stage with him. That is fantastic. We really need that nowadays.
Yes, we do. And he was quite revolutionary in some ways by introducing the practice of interfaith prayer meetings that he would hold twice in every day, the primary one being evening, and he would have prayers or songs from various religions recited and sung, and just really trying to underline and underscore his major belief that all religions should be treated equally and all people who practice them should be allowed to practice whatever religion or faith or spirituality. He was also very inclusive with people who did not practice a religion, atheists, agnostics, humanists. And so he enfolded them into his whole philosophy of nonviolence as well. He had many close colleagues who didn't practice Hinduism as he did at all in India, but he, felt that he could work with them as easily as he could work with Hindus or Muslims or Christians or Jains or Buddhists or anybody who living in India or anywhere in the world.
You made these 2 films called Gandhis Gift and Gandhis Awakening. What are they about?
Well, the Gandhi's Gift film is actually chronologically later than the Gandhi's Awakening, but we made it first, and we often suggest that people might want to watch it first. It is about the dramatic, final, tragic, and triumphant years of Mahatma Gandhi when he is in his 70s and he's released from prison for the last time, in which he has lost his the people who were the 2 closest to him, his wife of more than 50 years and his close personal secretary of 25 years. And so he's at a low point emotionally and physically. He comes out of prison with a number of diseases, you know, such as anemia and things like that he's coping with. And then as well, while he was in prison, India has gone ahead and its leaders have pretty much agreed to a partition of India, which is totally against his philosophy and intention of creating a united India along religious and caste and gender and all lines. And so the Indian leadership has decided to agree to a partition of India. And so his heart has been broken by that as well. So the film begins, Gandhi's Gift, with him as almost a broken man in those respects. Way. And then we see him rallying in his 70s to do some of his most important grassroots spiritual and political work. And so we see him at his lowest and then in many ways at his highest point of attainment in spiritual in the spiritual realm as well as the political realm at the end of his life. So that's a very dramatic look at the man. And then the Gandhi's Awakening film is about his 21 early transformative years in South Africa, which few people know about except scholars, or if they know that he was in South Africa, they may not know how important that time was to him in terms of him becoming the great peaceful peacemaker, social activist that he becomes later known for in India. He actually began that work in South Africa. So we show how he Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, this young, naive attorney, goes in his 20s to South Africa and leaves a very powerful activist against injustice and oppression. And few people know that story. And it's a spiritual story, but it's also a very strong, powerful political story because we see how Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi becomes the Mahatma or the great soul.
So being South African myself, it feels to me like it's part of my history that I completely missed. So what is Gandhi's message and why is it so relevant today? Why would I want to bring him back to South Africa? Because that's how I feel.
I think he's so important today because of his message, this life message of nonviolence that he really embodied in his own life. And that's why he said, my life was my message. He wanted people to look at it and see how you could become nonviolent from the inside out, both inside and outside. In other words, creating the peace and the nonviolence within yourself and then extending it out toward everybody that you come into contact and including your community and your nation. And so he created, this was his revolutionary concept and practice known as satyagraha, which is called clinging. He translated it as meaning clinging to the truth or holding firmly to the truth. And he believed that the truth of the universe was nonviolence, that at the very heart of the universe is nonviolence. And so that is, if we hold firm to that, we can bring down any oppression or injustice that we might face, because we're looking at our opponents with a kind of love and compassion. And so we're not fighting them, so to speak, with violence, but with nonviolence and love in our hearts. And that kind of pure love and compassion can melt the heart of our opponents. And so this was the powerful tool that he brought into the world for us to use in the political or social arena. And this had never been done, at least on that scale, before. to bring this nonviolent concept into political activism, and he modeled that for us. And I think that the world is looking for a way out of the chaos and conflict that we're facing at this moment. And really, everything flows from nonviolence. All of our ways of being and acting in the world flow from how we are in terms of our inner selves, and how, if we're nonviolent, how we project that into the world. And so I happen to believe, and I know co-producer, director Kel Kearns believes this as well, is that, all of the challenges that we're facing in our world today, you can name any of them, from, sexual assault to climate change, from bullying to nuclear war, from greediness taking over our society to the extinction of our species. I could go on and name, racism, poverty, all of these challenges that we're faced in our world today really could be resolved if we were to take on these techniques that Gandhi really pioneered, his whole way of being, and also his way. What he talked a lot about is that you practice on a daily basis this way of being peaceful, and the interfaith prayers, and all of these kind of unifying acts. And then occasionally you're called upon to act in a way that may take you out into your community, to lead a march, or even participate in a march, to give a speech, to write a letter to the editor, to do something political. And so these daily preparations are what you do in order to prepare yourself to take those big actions. And I think many in the world would like to take political actions, or take a stand, if you will, on certain issues they feel strongly about. And he really is a great model for how we can do that in a nonviolent way, how we can do that in a way that is enriching the community and doesn't really harm anyone, but allows us to stand up for what we, believe is the truth. And that's what his whole life was about. And both of these films show this very vividly, is he was always reaching for the truth and holding firm to the truth. That's what he spent his whole life doing, what he saw as the truth. And so I think more and more people are wanting to follow a kind of path like this. And many of us, we don't have to, but many of us appreciate having a model or an example of someone who went before us and took these kinds of actions and did them in a very successful way, as Gandhi did.
It sounds to me like he was the ultimate mediator. Sounds to me like he was the ultimate mediator, where he said it's okay to differ, but go a step higher, which is where we need to look after each other.
He did. He was an ultimate mediator, because one of his basic philosophies or truth, as he saw it, was that everyone had the divine within them. That was a basic tenet of his. So therefore, you didn't hate anyone. You might oppose them, but he really said that over and over again. Don't hate the person that you're opposing. And so he was mediating, as it were, between ideas or people or communities or factions or sects or all these kinds of things, that he was able to see both sides and to believe that both sides had value. Now, that didn't mean that he wouldn't stand up for what he believed in, but he would also respect the opponent, even if it's someone that he was very much in disagreement of. So he was a mediator, and he really, he did ask people to go to a higher level and to really reach down and, you know, go to this higher level. And just about everyone we interviewed extensively people who actually knew him. And to a person, they all said that he, first of all, he treated everyone equally, no matter if they were a child or an elder, an opponent or a colleague. You know, it didn't matter, and that he gave them respect, and also that he made people feel that they could go to the higher level, that they were empowered. And that is because he treated them with such respect and honor. And so they felt supported enough to sort of go to a different level, you know, because of his acceptance of them, which of course he would say he was doing that as the divine does, you know, if you God or higher power, you know, accepting us, and he was doing that, and so therefore they felt empowered.
You indicated that you that's a bit noisy. You indicated that you're ready to release these two films to the world. Where are you in terms of releasing the films? At what stage are you?
Well, the Gandhis Gift film, we've been having test screenings of it for about a year, and the Gandhi's Awakening film about Gandhi's early years in South Africa, we've just completed, so we really haven't even screened that one yet. But both have been accepted by American Public Television to be broadcast on PBS in the United States. So we're very excited about that, because they estimate they have something like 198 million viewers, you know, on PBS. We've also signed with them this worldwide contract, which means that the films would be shown in various different countries as well on their public stations. And a couple of the countries that have accepted one of the films or the other are Italy and 22 countries in Africa. Not yet South Africa, but different sub-Saharan African countries. So we're very excited about that, to know that the films will be getting out, you know, into the world in that way. That's always our goal, of course, to reach as many people as possible. American Public Television is public television, so as independent filmmakers, we have to raise funds in order to prepare these for broadcast. So we are in the process of raising our final funds for the two films to prepare them for broadcast. There's a lot of technical things that need to be done for getting films ready for broadcast, and also early distribution. So if anyone is inspired by Gandhi and wishes to give us a contribution, we're a nonprofit in the United States, they could go to our website, and certainly we would be very appreciative of that assistance. I see you've put the website on the screen, so thank you for that, gandhisgift.org, and we would be happy to answer any questions anybody has about our nonprofit, but we would also be very appreciative for contributions to further this work. I
will show the link again later on. You mentioned that you've test screenings with various audiences. What were the responses of the audience on these films?
Well, we've had great responses from audiences. They've really embraced, thus far, Gandhi's Gift, because we haven't yet screened Gandhi's Awakening. But I had an interesting experience recently presenting Gandhi's Gift. This is about Gandhi's later years at a library in Las Vegas on the very day of those horrific shootings that occurred, that mass murder event place. And I was actually in the library on that afternoon. Of course, we had no way of knowing what was going to transpire later in the day, less than a mile away from where I was.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, that discussion was all about violence and nonviolence. And those in the audience were talking to me about their concerns that, now they were talking about their community, that their community they felt was so accepting of violence. It was militaristic, and they were particularly concerned about the young people whom they believed accepted militarism and just a whole violent lifestyle without even questioning it. So those kinds of statements were actually being made that very day, when later, you know, this terrible tragic event would occur. I just found that a fascinating connection, because I'm listening to people who are concerned about their community, and then that occurs later. There is a connection. There is a connection between these events. You could say, well, that's an isolated event. The man was, you know, mentally ill or whatever. You could say whatever you want to. People are concerned about their communities. And a lot of time, as I mentioned, all of those ills earlier, they're related to violence. They're related in a violent perspective or point of view that people have, and that they believe they can use this violence on other people, on animals, on the environment with impunity. So it can't help but spread the way it has been in the United States, and I dare say in other countries too. But I feel, you know, on surer ground when I'm talking about the United States, because I live here and I see it on a daily basis, that, you know, this violence is just pervasive in our society. And so Gandhi is really the perfect antidote to that, because he really gives us a whole path to follow in order not to be led down the path of violence. And I include greed in with violence, because greed is a kind of violence toward other people, in the sense that, and Gandhi taught this all the time. He taught his grandsons this. We heard their stories, and they talked about him saying, you know, even if you throw out something like a used pencil, is what he was teaching his grandson. You have to realize that you're really impacting the rest of the world, your community, if you want to think of it in a smaller way, but you're impacting others because you're using resources that they could be using. So you can use that analogy. He was talking about a pencil with his grandson Arun, but he could be talking about food, or, you know, if we're greedy and we eat too much, or we acquire possessions too much, we're really taking resources from somebody else. So greed is a kind of violence. And he was very progressive, talking about, you know, that kind of violence, that you're doing violence to others by being greedy, because you're taking more than your share. And so that's why he's known for that great quotation, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And I see that quote on Facebook all the time. So I know that that really resonates with people. And it certainly resonates with me, you know, because I do understand that connection of, you know, when I'm greedy, I'm taking more than others, taking their share. And of course, now we see whole societies built on greed. And so therefore we have those people that are, you know, very, 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 very wealthy. And then those, in such a big discrepancy, are very poor and are struggling to make ends meet and feed their family, you know. So that's why we have that discrepancy. And interestingly enough, Gandhi's whole view of society was not like that, where there would be such a discrepancy between the wealthy and the poor. He saw, instead of a pyramid where the apex is supported by the base, his vision was of an oceanic circle, as he called them, circles, beginning with the individual, and then villages, like circles on an equal basis, emanating outward. And so it's not going up or down, but all on an equal basis, radiating outward in circles. And so it's quite a different vision than what many of our societies or nations are built upon at the moment. And he would change that radically and make everyone equal, no matter who they were or where they were or what religion they were, what sex they were, whatever they were all equal.
Like, if I can quote him, he said, the sky belongs to all.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that he was he followed the Hindu philosophy. Was that the spiritual basis for his political methods, or were there other influences as well for his spiritual message?
Well, his Hindu religion was partially a basis for his political ideas, and I would say, just referring to this whole equality, absolute equality of his, that was one that I would say was related to his Hindu belief that in every single person there is the divine, and that's, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Upanishads and all of that, those great Hindu texts. Yeah. That everyone has the divine in them, so they're all absolutely equal. So I would say that definitely flowed from his Hinduism, but he was also very, very moved by Jesus's message, the Christian message of, in particular, the Sermon on the Mount, which he actually read before he would meet with British officials. Or the viceroy or somebody like that, because he believed that was the essence of Christianity, is the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor. I mean, you know, that he loved, you know, dearly, and he always loved the poor throughout his life, and so he was very moved by that, and also by the whole symbol of the cross, in the sense of suffering, taking on suffering voluntarily to help your community or the world to, he believed that was essential. In fact, he did that. And so he was very moved by the willingness to self-suffer, you know, for a greater good. Now, some people might disagree with that, you know, suffering, but he, I'm just telling you what he was very moved by. And so you can see that in his life, this willingness to take on suffering, which a lot of people would say, no, I don't want to have any part of that, you know, but he believed that was essential. So he was moved by the Christian mysticism as well as Hinduism. He also found, you know, other aspects of other religions very moving as well. But I would say those are probably the two most central to his philosophy. He did some reading and corresponded with Tolstoy, who had a vision of a sort of a ideal community of people living together in peace and harmony and equality, and that was based upon the principles of Jesus. So he did have this and he actually studied the Bible for a while. He also studied the Quran, so he really made it a point and a practice to learn about other religions and so he saw beauty in each of them. And he would, as I said, take that beauty and enfold, in particular, though, I would say Hinduism and Christianity affected him in a very deep way. But he was a practicing Hindu. Yeah.
So he set this example of immense tolerance and understanding, which I think the world desperately needs. But these are not the only two films you've made. You've made some others along similar themes as well.
Yes. I would mention the film that my co-producer, director Kel Kearns, made in 1987. That was before I was working with him. But I mention it because it was the PBS biography of Martin Luther King Jr. And so that to me is very correlated with this work on Gandhi. In fact, in Gandhi's Awakening, Kel has used an excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr. to show how King used Gandhi's idea of nonviolent resistance in the civil rights movement. We specifically show this scene from Chicago, which was one of the worst riots that King found himself in when he was peacefully protesting. And so there's a real correlation between Gandhi and King, because King really felt he showed him the way, how to actually nonviolently protest in the way that he did. So I would mention that film. It's called In Remembrance of Martin, that Kel did in 1987. And then we've worked on recently, Kel's done a number of other films on nonviolence, but recently I would mention, and people could find these on our website if they're interested in them, the PBS biography of the great Sufi poet Rumi. We had the biography of Rumi that was on PBS in 2007. And that's a beautiful film that I would recommend. We filmed it in Turkey, 3 trips to Turkey, filming there to show Rumi's shrine, which is visited by thousands every year and is a very sacred place. So, and we've got wonderful live footage that Kel shot of the whirling dervishes. Very, very moving film. And
oh yes, I saw that.
Did you? Oh, and then
I did, yes.
Yes. And then another one I would mention, because it's also correlated to what we've been talking about, is called Globalized Soul. And that was about the Parliament of the World's Religions. And so it's on religious diversity and spirituality and just the whole celebration of the vital differences but similarities in spiritual paths. And specifically in that one, we filmed in India to show a Jain woman who was practicing her humanitarian work, and she had been a delegate at the Parliament of the World's Religions, and so we followed her home to India to show that great humanitarian work. And then we followed a Muslim Sufi sheikh from the Parliament of the World's Religions back to Jerusalem, where he was a co-founder with a Jewish man of the Jerusalem Peacemakers. And so they're doing grassroots peace work between Muslims and Jews in Jerusalem. And so that's great grassroots work. Very Gandhian, by the way. And when we went into the Sufi Sheikh's home, the first thing we saw on the wall was a picture of Gandhi, and so it's very clear he saw Gandhi as a role model for his work as well. So that film was called Globalized Soul. And the one about Rumi, the one about Rumi was, I said the title, it was Rumi Returning.
Fascinating. I was very fortunate when I was in Turkey. I saw those whirling dervishes. It's really an amazing experience.
It truly is a very sacred experience, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Cynthia, this has been fascinating. You do need a lot of support for making and distributing these films. Not just the financial support for making them, but also invitations for distributing them. Tell us what you need, and people obviously can get hold of you on your website, which I will show you again, if they want to contact you.
Yes, sure. Well, as you mentioned, we do need the financial support, and we're very appreciative of that, since we're a nonprofit, independent company of really two of us doing most everything. We do have a webmaster and a couple of other people who help us, have helped us with editing and this kind of thing, but mostly it's two of us. And so we do need financial support. In terms of distribution, you mentioned, well, we often show these films at gatherings of all types, often at universities, and other groups, spiritual groups or peace groups, or, as I said before, I was at a library, presenting Gandhi's Gift. And so we show these films. People in the audience might either be an organizer of a group, or they might know of a group or an organization that might want to sponsor a screening. They could contact us through the website as well. So they can certainly support us by going on our Facebook page and liking our page, Gandhi's Gift. And they can keep up with our work through that, and by looking at our website, and just getting the word out to people about these films. When they are available on DVD, they're not yet available on DVD, but when they are, they could purchase a DVD, or they could watch the films online. Of course, we'll have them so that people could rent them. So all these kinds of things, if they keep apprised of our website and our Facebook page, Gandhi's Gift Facebook page, they can keep up with our work and help support us.
Cynthia, this has been fascinating, and you are doing really, really amazing work. I would love to see both of those films, and I will find a way of doing that.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. And I'll see you again next week, Sunday, same place, same time, with another fascinating topic. Thank you and goodbye.